Thank you. What a wonderful sound that is, especially after a lunch break. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Anne McElvoy. I'm executive editor at Politico and host of the Power Play interview podcast, which couldn't be more fitting for the times that we're in and the material that we have this afternoon. We're, of course, in our session now looking at the high-level report on Ukraine's security and Euro-Atlantic integration. Just before we get going on that, we have a video from Hillary Clinton, who will be known to some of you, at least, unless you're very, very young, as former US Secretary of State. That is some pre-recorded remarks, but I think it would set us up very nicely for the conversation I'm about to have with my guests. So let's have a look at that.
Welcome to the Copenhagen Democracy Summit. I am very sorry I can't be with you in person because I think this is such an important gathering. But I'm grateful for the opportunity to share a few words about this crucial fight for global democracy. Nowhere are the stakes of this fight higher than on the battlefields of Ukraine, where soldiers have bravely pushed back against Russian forces for over 700 days. It's important to note that the invasion of Ukraine is not a limited regional dispute between neighbors. Vladimir Putin is also motivated by a deep, abiding opposition to democracy more broadly. That is why he has waged a long-running shadow war to destabilize free societies and discredit democratic institutions in the United States, Europe, and around the world. Ukraine is one flashpoint in this larger global struggle between democracy and autocracy, one that stretches from the steppes of Eastern Europe to the halls of the United States Capitol. For 75 years, NATO has ensured peace and stability in Europe and North America, and has been a bulwark against authoritarian leaders like Putin. If we can find a path for Ukraine to join NATO, the Alliance for Global Democracy will be even stronger. That's why the Copenhagen Democracy Summit convened the International Working Group on Ukraine's security and Euro-Atlantic integration. The Ukrainian government and its people are on the front lines of the fight to defend democracy for all of us against authoritarianism. Over the last 3 years, they have demonstrated remarkable resilience and courage. We owe it to them to match that resilience and courage with our own, to meet the moment with continued support. This is a decisive moment for the West and for NATO. How we respond will decide the fate of the 21st century global order. Half the world's population will vote this year in national elections, including in the United States. The outcome of America's presidential election will decide the future of our own American democracy. But no matter the results of our national contests, support for Ukraine should not be a partisan political issue in America or in any European country. Defending Ukraine's autonomy is an existential matter of international security and truly the fate of democracy itself. Putin cannot be allowed to dictate Ukraine's future, and we cannot allow him to continue to be the doorman for Ukraine's integration with the West. It's important we show the brave people of Ukraine and their extraordinary leaders that our support for them and their future will not waver. It was a pleasure to work with Anders and Andrii and so many former leaders on the urgent recommendations in the report they will share today. I look forward to hearing the outcome of your discussions about its findings. United, we can ensure that democracy is safeguarded in the 21st century and beyond. That's our challenge and our mission.
Stirring words there from the former Secretary of State. And with me, of course, two people very heavily involved in creating that report. Andrii Yermak, head of the Office of the President of Ukraine. Welcome to you. And Anders Fogh Rasmussen, founder and chairman, of course, of the Alliance of Democracies Foundation. You can probably tell who is who by their wardrobe choices, but they are very much united in this project. This is also a live taping of Politico's Power Play podcast, our interview show. So if you'd like to listen to that afterwards, it will be available on all your good podcast apps. Please follow us, and then we can continue the conversation that we're about to start today. This report, gentlemen, has been launched just ahead of that 75th NATO summit in July in Washington, D.C. What was it really aimed at bringing together that wasn't implicit anyway in the challenge that the West has in supporting Ukraine and getting to Ukraine what it needs? Anders, I might start with you. But please both chip in.
Yeah, first of all, I would like to welcome you, Andrii, to Copenhagen. I know it's been quite a challenging travel to here. So the more we appreciate that you're here to launch the report that we agreed on in the international working group that President Zelensky asked us to co-chair. So our point of departure is the following. We cannot allow Putin any success in Ukraine, because if he gets success in Ukraine, he will just be encouraged to continue. That's why Ukraine has asked its allies to help it defend against the Russian aggression. That is in full accordance with international law. According to the UN Article 51, UN Charter Article 51, we are allowed to help Ukraine, and we do so. And we should see our report in that context. I would highlight 3 concrete proposals in that report. Firstly, we recommend to lift all caveats, all restrictions on weapon deliveries to Ukraine. Ukraine should receive all the weapons Ukraine needs to win the war, not only to survive, but to win the war. Second, we suggest to establish a missile and air defense system located on NATO territory along the borders of Ukraine to help Ukraine shoot down incoming Russian missiles and drones, just like the US and other partners helped Israel to defend against Iranian missiles and drones. And then our third important suggestion is that we extend an invitation to Ukraine to join NATO, to start accession talks with NATO, and that invitation should be extended at the Washington summit in July, and we should task the NATO-Ukraine Council to determine the specific conditions that should be fulfilled for Ukraine to join NATO. We think this report, these recommendations will pave the path to peace.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for invitations. I'm just coming from Ukraine for a couple of hours because it's a very important this conference here and our presentation of the second documents which we issued with my friends Anders. The first, if you remember, it was Kyiv Security Compact. On the basis of these documents was agreed and signed the Vilnius declarations, and already Ukraine agreed and signed 9 security agreements. And we are working on it, and in the future I hope it will be more. I'm absolutely agree with Anders and just added 2 very important things. First of all, I'd like to use this opportunity to say, you see that Russia started a new counteroffensive. I'd like to say that more than 2 years, brave Ukrainian nations, fighting and show to the world that democracy is strong, freedom is strong, independence is strong, and we need support of the world. We need concrete support of the world. We need strong steps, because if we together not stop Putin and Russia, every country, in every continent, maybe next missions. And concerning the very important points, I'd like to add that it's very important that our group recommended to stop any limitation, any restrictions for delivery weapons, but also very important to use these weapons, because we need to answer and we need to really be strong to continue these fightings, not just to defend, but liberated our lands, because already during these 2 years we liberated more than 50% of the territory which was occupied from 24 February 2022.
I'll stay with you if I could, Mr. Yermak. Isn't the reality of this situation that before those structures become available, and this may be what people, either here in the audience or listening to the podcast, will be asking themselves, why this focus on the NATO entry when many of the events that you're really going to determine the immediate future are taking place on the ground, and where the situation on the ground is proving very difficult. David Cameron, the UK Foreign Secretary, saying today that the Russian offensive around Kharkiv, as we meet this week, is extremely dangerous, a dangerous moment in the war. You have, of course, the full visibility on that. How do you assess keeping these two goals and objectives in mind at the same time?
First of all, I think 2 years it's enough that world understand with Ukraine not just able to stop the Russian army, but Ukraine enabled to win. But of course, we need the security and we need to strong support, not for the short period of time, and for the future. And today, for all the world, it's understandable. The most powerful, the most serious security and the membership in NATO is why our perspective and our absolutely political will and the will of our people is to be members of European Union and to be members of NATO. And of course, I'm again, this is position of our colleagues from international working groups, that Ukraine is ready to receive these invitations. And of course, it will be very strong messages to Moscow, to Putin, that democracy world, that alliance country is strong, united, because the last membership of Finland and Sweden is a result of invasion of Russia. Russia changed reality. Russia breaking the security system in Europe. And now it's time, it's critical moment to support Ukraine, to give so important motivation for our heroes, for our soldiers who now in the front line and who now protected the border not just of Ukraine, they protected democracy of the world. They protected free world.
And Anders, and I'm sure you want to come in on that. I just had a sort of slightly squeezed question really on the NATO entry plan, which historically it has not been open to countries at war. I think in the past you've indicated that you felt that was perhaps something that had outlived its usefulness given the times we're in. Can you just clarify what you see the position now being for Ukraine if it is to be a member of NATO? Are we saying that basically that is now off the table, that old restraint, or are you kind of making an exception because this is such an important matter?
Yeah, it is an important matter. And I don't think we should accept the argument that we cannot extend an invitation to Ukraine as long as the war is going on. Because if you accept that argument, you will de facto give Putin an incentive to continue the war, to avoid exactly to avoid Ukrainian membership of NATO. So that's why we have to break that argument, and that's also why I think an invitation to start accession talks will that way pave the path to peace. It's not equivalent to Ukraine joining NATO overnight, but it is an invitation to start accession talks. They will take place in the NATO-Ukraine Council that will determine the specific conditions. Obviously, there will be difficult issues to solve. We know that.
What will they be?
Yeah, one of them, of course, will be how to implement Article 5 when an applicant and accessing country is already at war. But let me stress, we will invite the whole of Ukraine to join NATO, to start accession talks. That is, Ukraine, as it was defined in 1991, within its internationally recognized borders, we will invite the whole of Ukraine. And then, in the NATO-Ukraine Council, we will have to sort out how to deal with the fact that the eastern part of Ukraine is still at war. But I think we have good solutions to that.
Sorry, and if I may to add, yes, it's difficult. Yes, maybe it will be first in the history, but agree that the first in the history, one country have so challenges after 24 February 2022 and show how it's possible to fight and how to possible to destroy it, any wish of this aggressor, of these dictators. We're living in the changing world, and we need to be progressive. We need to be proactive in decisions of the leaders.
Just staying with you, Mr. Yermak, how do you think you can hold off what looks like a major offensive being conducted at the moment around Kharkiv? I know there's been a large evacuation of civilians there, and Russian forces also attacking it in the northeast. It does look like the Kremlin is seizing a window of opportunity before those weapons that came through from the Congress package eventually, but before they are fully in theatre and fully operational, and that must give you quite a lot to do in very short order. At the same time, we do seem to be seeing a renewed assault. Tell me how you're coping with that and how you read the intentions of the Kremlin.
First of all, I'd like to say that you understand that we are living in this and we know the exactly information because every hours we are spent with our military, with our regional authorities. It's not true that it's massive evacuation from Kharkiv. It's true that it's a very hard situation around in the Kharkivsky regions. It was, as I said, the new counteroffensive. Russia spent a lot of people, a lot of techniques. Of course, it's true that 6 months then was we waiting for the decisions in the Congress, which finally was voted, and thank you very much, American nations, both parties, President Biden. Of course, it's make a big troubles and difficulties. But once again, I coming from Ukraine, and I'd like to say that we keep this position, we continue to fighting, we are in the contact with our partners, and we able to stop and just this new counteroffensive. But of course, once again, one thing which we ask, we need enough weapons. Our people not tired, our people is strong, our heroes continue to fighting. One thing which we ask, more air defense, more artillery, more long-range missile, an opportunity to use it to answer, because sometimes one problem which we have, it's what our soldier, not enough, the ammunition, not the weapons.
And of course, that must be hugely difficult and even a little, I'm sure you don't think of it in this way, but demoralizing for those who put their lives on the line for their country. What about those difficulties in mobilization? The war has gone on for a long time. There is great danger for these young and even slightly older people now being pulled into mobilization. It is, of course, not universally popular. As you know, there's been a bit of a flummery on social media about the techniques of recruitment. Just tell me, from the heart, what you feel about that. It's a very difficult balance, isn't it, to motivate and to keep that motivation that you bring to the stage here. And at the same time, maybe a lot of people will be very worried about being drafted.
First of all, any mobilization in the history of any countries, it's not was popular. It's always difficult questions. But 2 years, again, we showed that our people very motivated. But it's a very corresponded to how we equip our brigades. It's very corresponded what a strong political decisions made it by our partners, as why we are very much looking, first of all, to continue for signing the security agreement which based of the Vilnius Declaration. Now we are very working hardly with our American friends and colleagues. And we are looking in June for the first inaugurated peace summit, which is very important because it's necessary to be successful in front line, but also it's necessary to be successful in diplomacy.
So you have no longer-term worries, as the war looks like it will go on for some time, unfortunately, about that level of mobilization that you can achieve while keeping public opinion as firmly behind this struggle for Ukraine's independence as it's been?
I can answer if shortly to your questions. If we will have enough weapons, we will have enough people.
Thank you. That's a very good short answer. I wondered also, Mr. Rasmussen, what you made as a former NATO General Secretary. You've dealt with your opposite numbers in Moscow, what you make of Moscow's position at the moment, and particularly that decision by Vladimir Putin to get rid of Sergei Shoigu, whose long-standing ally as defense minister. They've had their ups and downs, but that does seem to be the way in the Kremlin these days. And a quite surprising replacement there, Mr. Belousov, an economist who seems to be there to kind of get the economy and the Ukraine, for want of a rather too polite a word, strategy into line. It does sound like they want to boost up the Russian war machine, and I wondered what your interpretation was of that.
Yeah, but I don't think we will see a lot of change. I think the strategy will be the same. The Russian strategy is to destroy everything they're able to destroy, to try to actually try to crack the soul, the spirit of the Ukrainian people. So I fully agree with Andrii that when it comes to mobilizing the Ukrainian, very courageous Ukrainian people and the brave troops, it's also important to show some political determination and courage in the Western allied countries. And this is the reason why it's so important that the NATO summit in July in Washington, D.C., sends a very clear message to Putin that whatever Putin thinks, whatever he does, he cannot avoid the inevitable, namely Ukrainian membership of NATO. And at the same time, it would send a very clear signal to a message to the Ukrainian people. We are with you, not only for as long as it takes, but also with as much as it takes. And I think that's important in the mobilization of Ukrainian forces.
Absolutely. And if I can add that the strong decisions in the summit in July will send the strong messages to Putin that he don't have any veto rights in NATO. It's extremely important.
To what extent have you become concerned, as the war has gone on, it's a war on many fronts, as we know, about infiltration by Russia? I think there was a recent case which you were dealing with in Kyiv, and infiltration in some of the security services. And of course, the history of these countries is very intertwined, and there is also a deliberate push by the Kremlin to infiltrate the military security services, etc. in Ukraine. Have you had to make adjustments while you're fighting on the front lines to deal with that?
Yeah.
Who would?
I think
Yeah, no?
you should.
It turns out to be your problem.
Yeah.
My friends know about all our problems and questions.
Please feel free
Very
to
good
both.
and very help.
You understand what I'm saying, which is not that there is a lack of loyalty, but you've got a society that has often been very connected in parts to Russia, and you have a very determined desire by the Kremlin, using methods that we all know from the late Cold War and before, to infiltrate a free society, or a society that wants to be free.
You know, Putin, by these aggressions, made some very historical things. Our society united so strong that never was united. And then he now destroyed and bombing and sending Iranian drones to Odessa, to Kharkiv, mostly Russian-speaking cities. You know, it's very originally just people who is speaking Russian started to speak Ukrainians. And it's mean that all the people who is in Ukraine, they exactly understand, because we are living a long period of time in same country, Soviet Union. But now all these people understand that aggressor coming to your house, killed your relatives, kidnap your children, it's not brother, it's not friends. It's absolutely understandable. This aggressor, its enemy, and this is the country who coming to Ukraine not just for territories, not just this is narrative that about NATO, but he started invasion in the moment that Ukraine was not a member of the NATO and just not have invitation in 24 February 2022. It means that the goal is to destroy the Ukrainian nations, to kill people because we are Ukrainians, but we are strong and we will win.
What keeps this? I can feel his applause. I don't want to get in the way of the applause. I think that would be very churlish of me to stop you getting your round of applause for that sentiment. And how do you keep this sort of moving forward, keep it on the front pages? I'm thinking back and turning us back now to this NATO plan and bringing Ukraine into the NATO family. We know that we're living in a period of so-called poly-crises. I mean, we've got kind of more wars than peace and more conflicts than peace going on in many parts of the world. Is that, to your mind, the biggest concern, that the bandwidth of governments will possibly see changes of government? We might see a change of government in the UK. We might see a very different stripe of change of government in Washington. Are you worried that you've obviously come up with a very thought-through idea about where this NATO plan fits for Ukraine, that it just kind of drifts off or gets derailed by other things that are going on?
Yes, it is a matter of concern, and we can already see now how Putin has profited from the Israel-Hamas war. It has turned attention a bit away from Ukraine, so it's an ongoing effort to keep Ukraine high on the agenda. The Ukrainians are fighting on behalf of all of us. We have an obligation to help Ukraine with everything we can, militarily, with money, and also politically. And that's why we have worked hard on this report, supported by a broad circle of former political leaders. We have the freedom to speak our mind, and we will use that opportunity to try to keep Ukraine high on the agenda.
And Andrii Yermak, you will know, if you've the risks you take when you go on stage with a journalist. Every time I see you, sometimes on Zoom, now in person, I say, I really want to come to Kyiv. I want to come and report more. I miss very much being in Kyiv, like a lot of people who know and love Ukraine very much and have the ongoing struggles with the Ukrainian language, but bear with me. In what sort of time frame do you think that we could be meeting in springtime, perhaps taking this conference with us to Kyiv in peacetime? What kind of framework do you think we'd be looking at?
Nobody knows this, but believe me that 24 hours, 7 days, all Ukrainians, we do our best together with our partners, and maybe not more than Ukrainians want to bring the just peace in our lands. But I'm sure that this day is coming, and with our friends, I'm very happy to be today in Denmark, because Denmark is our real big friends who has supported us, not just by words, by actions, from first day of these invasions. And believe me that our relations with Denmark, with our partners, it's not for today, it's not for the short period of time, it's historically. And this is for many, many generations. And we're very happy, we very appreciate. I use this opportunity to say all of you for your thanks for your all support, all help, and we will win. Win together. Thank you.
I think the clock has been our joint enemy, but I hope you enjoyed that conversation. I'd like to thank Andrii Yermak and Fogh Rasmussen for their candour at such a pivotal time, and thank you for joining me on stage today.
Thank you. Thank you very much.